Anyway, it's time to talk more about Lord of the Rings, and what better way than to talk about femininity, feminism in Lord of the Rings for another viral video. Let's go! Honestly,
I can talk about this now because I'm a woman.
True.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World!
I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome everybody to the One Night Film Podcast. I'm your host Seth Mossberg, and I need to do it in a different tone because I am getting tired of the intro that I just made in episode 1 and stuck with it, and so I need to change it up somehow. Anyways, hi guys, welcome to Lord of the Rings Part 2. As per Lord of the Rings style, we are expanding the conversation because we need more content, and there's definitely more we could talk about. Also, there is another reason why we should have a follow-up with Will and Annika, who were on the last episode of Lord of the Rings, but Annika became a viral sensation on Instagram. Her comments about Aragorn have now garnered 200,000 views on our page and doubled our our follower count. It is, as of recording, 202,000 views, 14.8 thousand likes, 800 comments, and 4.4 thousand shares. That is a lot. It's a heckin' lot of engagement, especially with our little Instagram page. Annika, what have you thought this last week of going through all of those comments and calling you the bunk bed lady?
Yeah. It's been crazy. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty active on social media. I have an Instagram account for some of my sewing stuff that I do, but I've definitely never been a part of anything that's gotten that many views, even if it's pretty small in relation to, in the grand scope of social media and millions upon millions of views. Yeah, it's been a time. At first, I was much more, I think I was taking everything a little too seriously, and then I realized that wasn't very healthy. But yeah, if any of our listeners, not viewers, are from the video, I would like to clarify and say I was not wearing a blanket. It was a cloak that I had worn in college theater production of The Hobbit that I was the costume designer for, and it was very special to me, so I decided to wear it to be kind of on brand and on theme. And yes, I was underneath the bunk bed. The day we recorded the podcast, we had a huge snowstorm, so I was unable to make it out of the dorm, and so I was recording it at my roommate's combination bunk bed desk because it was kind of the only quiet place I could find where I didn't have to leave the building because there was 18 inches of snow falling. So ultimately, I'm glad that was something that maybe sparked some conversation. That was interesting to people, I guess. Yeah, as far as some of the more substantial challenges to my thought, I mean, of course, I haven't seen every movie or TV show. There's a lot of characters that people were naming that I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm still pretty young. I'm a double major senior in college. I don't have a lot of time to watch movies, but I still stand by what I said. In my opinion, and from the movies that I have seen, I still stand by everything that I said in that reel. And yes, I am sorry that I called them orcs and not Urukai. That is, I will take that L. I have failed as a Lord of the Rings fan, and I do apologize for that. I should have known better. What's the Logan Paul quote? I've made a severe and continuous lapse in judgment.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think any of the criticism aimed at you was not valid in any way. Some people legitimately are like, well, you have no valid opinion because you're under a bunk bed. I'm like, what? That makes no sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, honestly, man, the internet needs to be a little bit more gracious sometimes. Of course, you can have an opinion. For one, it's okay to have opinions that are different than other people's. The internet does not get that very easily. On top of that, you can still stand by your judgment of Aragorn being a peak form of masculinity, especially in major Hollywood productions. But everyone else's examples could be great. You just have not seen them. A lot of people were bringing up Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I've seen season 1. he's a good character. I don't see him holding a candle up to Aragorn. Some of them are trolls, some of them were just straight up mean, but at least it was engagement. I'm gonna say that
in
it
the
was
grand scheme of how brutal Instagram Reel comments are known for being, it could have been lower.
Yeah.
To be totally honest.
I'm gonna say that one of the reasons it popped off is because it was not my face. It was the face of a girl talking about masculinity, and people thought that they need to make that known.
So good job. We need to bring you on more, I guess.
I think me being a girl is an interesting piece of the puzzle, and there were a number of comments that were saying a woman can't talk about masculinity, or vice versa. Imagine if a man talked about femininity. To that I say, one, I can talk about whatever I want. You can't stop me. This is a free country. And two, I think it is important for both genders to offer their analyses on the other gender. Also, he's a fictional character, guys. Okay, it's not that deep. I'm saying he's a good example of masculinity in the context of a fantasy story where there are all these creatures. I don't know, that was another thing that was kind of recurring thing of people saying like, well, I guess I'm not the king and heir to the throne, so I have no hope. No, you do, okay? As Jordan Peterson would say, and Will can give us as an impression, make your bed, okay? Put on some deodorant, brush your teeth, okay? Be kind, be a decent human being, work hard, be respectful, okay, especially to women, and yeah, be chivalrous. And more times than not, no matter what you might look like, you know, no matter what body type you might have, if you're conventionally attractive or not, the right girl is gonna see that and she's gonna love you for that. So this is my PSA to all the discouraged men out there that are butthurt because they think that they have to be Aragorn to get a date. You don't. Just stop being so stinky.
Stop being a golem.
I don't know.
Be an Aragorn, not a golem.
This is my greatest strength, is that I don't have social media, so if people want to bug me, it's not going to affect me because I don't know. Try and cancel me from Twitter. I dare you. Because I don't have it. You think you have power, you fool? My internet's so slow you can't even hack into me.
You get disconnected before you can hack.
Seriously, I think I legitimately think people have tried to hack into me, and it hasn't worked because where I live, and I have so bad at the internet.
Yeah, that was the case of one of our reels going off and being viral last week. So that's pretty cool. Thank you to everyone who decided to follow and is now listening. We're glad you're part of the family. I know we attracted some of you to the podcast. That's fun. And again, thank you, Annika, for saying something so, I don't think it's that controversial. It's not that hot of a take, and yet people liked it and kept reposting it, things like that. So that's pretty cool.
I also thought it was interesting, and you can cut this out, Seth, if it's maybe a little too controversial. I watched the reel back because when some of the comments started coming in, I was like, did I even use the term toxic masculinity? And I had to watch it back because I couldn't remember. I watched it back. I never said toxic masculinity. I only said healthy masculinity. And to the people that were saying that healthy masculinity is just masculinity, I don't necessarily disagree. I was using the word healthy as a qualifier to help better define the conversation. But I just think it's interesting that I didn't even use the word toxic masculinity, and yet people were saying that it's not a thing. And I was like, well, I never said that.
Yeah. It's kind of the token or the phrases that are popular, and just because it was about that topic, people are like, oh, toxic masculinity, oh, this word that is a buzzword. Like, it was a very buzzword filled comment section, and I didn't even realize you hadn't said toxic masculinity. I saw all those comments and I figured you had said it at some point, but I didn't have a problem with that. It's still funny how they took that out of there. There was also a lot of arguing on Instagram Reels is so bad. Like, not only the layout of it to try and follow it, but also just don't hide behind a screen and do that. It's not productive. What I was going to say is that the same video on YouTube, I believe, has 1 view. The algorithm did not pick that up at all. So either that virality is coming in like a week, or it's just gonna stay dead, which is so interesting. It's interesting to see the different platforms. Anyway, it's time to talk more about Lord of the Rings. And what better way than to talk about femininity? Feminism in Lord of the Rings for another viral video. Let's go! Honestly.
I can talk about this now because I'm a woman.
True. Apparently. No, honestly, somebody's still going to be like, oh, she doesn't know anything about femininity, even though she's a woman and she's read the books and she's watched the movies, whatever. What do you think about how the women were written in Lord of the Rings, as well as kind of comparing book to movie? I know there's some conversation about that, how they kind of wrote the character where she wasn't supposed to be, or like she didn't exist before, and then they made a little bit of a love interest just to make it have that key point in the movie. Give us all of it.
Yeah, so I mean, your three main women in the movies are Arwen, Galadriel, and Eowyn. And I think they are all spectacular examples of femininity in their own ways. When I think of Arwen, I think it is interesting to examine her as the partner of Aragorn, who we did spend a lot of time on last time we talked. And something that I think is particularly interesting is that she is not in the books very much, at least, or especially compared to how much she's in the movies. And I think that that's one of the greatest achievements that Peter Jackson made when he was adapting the books into the movies, because he knew that he kind of needed to have this love story at the heart of the story, and he couldn't have that as much if it was Aragorn leaving her behind sort of in Fellowship and then coming back to her in Return of the King. Like that, it wouldn't really work to not have her throughout. And something I actually learned recently is at one time they were gonna have Liv Tyler, who is the actress for Arwen, be part of the elves that come to fight at the Battle of Helm's Deep. So she was gonna be present at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and she was actually even in like fight choreography and all of that. And then sort of last minute, Peter Jackson decided that it wouldn't fit to have her fill that warrior role, especially when you have Eowyn, who is this crazy, talented, skilled shield maiden. So I just think that's a very cool example of how they modified the character to still have her in the story, but still fulfill her role as Aragorn's supporter and partner by having her show up in the dreams and the visions and stuff like that. I think was just a very, very wise decision to have her in that role. And yeah, as this woman who is strong and stoic and gracious, but also committed and just so loving to this man, even if he's far away fighting in these battles. Like she's just by his side however she can be, and she refuses to leave him, and that loyalty is just beautiful. And yeah, I don't know about you guys, but that moment where she steps out from behind the little banner thing at the end of Return of the King and he just runs to her, it's one of the most gorgeous, I think, reunions that I've ever seen. And it's one of those moments in the movies that I always look forward to seeing again, even though I know it's gonna happen, I know it's coming. I'm always like, oh, she's gonna do the thing, and it'll be so cute. I
have only watched Lord of the Rings once through, so
I keep forgetting that you do that.
I know, I'm sorry.
I'm so disappointed in you, Seth.
I don't have those moments visualized in my mind as deeply. I somewhat remember it, but I honestly, it was at the end of a full marathon for one whole day, and so it's kind of gone in one ear, out the other, and I'm glad that that's a moment, and that's about all I can say. It is interesting that it's not always just criticism that's given to Peter Jackson for including a love interest so prominently when it really wasn't in the books, but even still, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. There's plenty of feelings to go around, even mostly brotherly feelings, and a little bit of romantic feelings was well placed, I believe.
I think we can link this in the description, but there's a bunch of like a really good, just about like women in Lord of the Rings generally, there's a bunch of really good videos by this channel called Pilgrim's Pass, and he does a lot of like really interesting breakdowns and talks about how like Galadriel is the epitome of femininity, or Eowyn, and Eowyn is really interesting because of how she's written and when she's written, the context for who's writing her, and especially like the scene in the film where she says, I am no man and stuff like that. It's just interesting to me because the way that Eowyn is written, if she was written today, I feel like it would be a lot different and probably would not be as enjoyable. But the way that she is written in the film is interesting because she's not necessarily like trying to, how should I say it? She's not trying to bring down the patriarchy, to put it in like simplest terms that like everybody likes to throw around, but it's the actions that she takes, she does it out of love, mostly out of the love for her uncle, and that's like the reason that like she's willing to like stand up to like this creepy sorcerer king thingamajiggy that doesn't have a face or whatever, and is willing to ride into battle and all sorts of things like that. And yeah, so overall, like that's just one example, but I think the women in Lord of the Rings are all really good examples of often femininity. I don't really think of, I'm just thinking now, but like how we talk about like Aragorn's kind of like healthy masculinity, and there's like versions of masculinity within Lord of the Rings that aren't as healthy. I can't really think of a super obvious character of a female character who embodies like negative aspects of femininity.
You're saying negative aspects of femininity, like our modern unbiblical
Maybe
version
not
of-
modern context, but maybe not even just like modern context, I guess. Just like a, you know, it's like I last time I had mentioned how like Gollum was like, maybe it's so much failed masculinity, just like is like kind of a almost somewhat something different compared to Aragorn and how he's presented and stuff like that. And like there's different, but yeah, just like there doesn't seem to be any really like super evil negative female characters in Lord of the Rings that I'm thinking about now.
Well, I think in that conversation we can turn to Galadriel and talk about how she is powerful in her femininity in a weak way. Again, she's not sort of the shield maiden, warrior princess kind of archetype. She's powerful in her quietness, in her stillness. And I think the way that was interpreted for screen was so cool, in the way that they had this special light fixture that reflected into her eyes so that it looked like her pupils were reflecting the stars, or not the pupils, whatever the thing on the outside is, the colored part. And to have that sort of powerful yet soft and quiet, and she's dressed all in white and elegant, it almost is more scary than maybe a woman who's wielding a sword, because she's able to get in your head. And I honestly can't remember if it's in the theatrical edition or if it's only in the extended edition, but there's a moment where she talks to Boromir in her little telekinetic, that's not what it is, but you know, she reaches out to him in his head, and that hits him so deeply because he's having this struggle already with the corruption of the ring, and she's able to pinpoint that and see that, and it makes him incredibly uncomfortable. So I think that's also one of those things where, of course, it's a fantasy story, so everything is a little more exaggerated, but I do firmly believe that God has given women especially an innate ability to empathize, and that aspect in Galadriel's character is kind of exaggerated for the sake of the story. But in that, it is a very feminine trait that is used for good, but can also be incredibly unsettling because it is such a deep power that, yeah, maybe she's not slinging around knives and she's going to slit your throat, but she can get in your head, and that's almost more scary.
Yeah, Galadriel's really interesting because Kate Blanchett? Okay, I don't know how to say her last name, but yeah, she did an excellent job with like nailing Galadriel, because, and this might even tie into the Rings of Power, because Galadriel is the quote-unquote main character in that TV show. But Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings trilogy is one of my favorite characters because she really gives off the aura of ancient power, because Galadriel in the lore is a couple thousand years old. I can't remember the exact, but she's literally older than the sun and the moon. She was born during the time of the two trees, I think, or maybe it was the two. She was born during the time of the lamps at the very least. So basically, she's really, really old and is really, really powerful and capable. And Kate Blanchett did an excellent job portraying that. And that's, yeah, I think that's like an interesting comparison to like Eowyn and stuff like that, who take on a more aggressive, quote unquote, role in some sense. And even Arwen does that a little bit in the film when she rescues the parties from the Nazgul.
Yeah, I have two things that have come to mind as you're talking. First off, we keep talking about femininity and masculinity. I think it's less of an issue in the greater scope of the Lord of the Rings than we're talking about. It's great to talk about characters individually and show the pros and cons to both. But as I think about it, there's a lot in Lord of the Rings that are that are kind of male centered. Most of the main characters are, and it's a very hearty war, charge, battle, all of those names that I'm just saying. But it's less of being masculine. Like, war doesn't need to be masculine. It's just a good story. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, Annika and many other girls still love the Lord of the Rings, and it's not because they're girls, and Will doesn't like it just because he's a guy. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm saying I'm not as much into it as you guys are. It's not because of femininity or masculinity, even though those character traits are present. It's just a good story. And I think that's what makes it stand the test of time and why it's still talked about these days. I think one of the things that I like to, one question that I ask when I see a movie to determine how good it was is, would I watch it again or would I buy this to own? Those are kind of two tiers. If I wouldn't do either, it's probably not a good movie. If I would watch it again, that means I might watch it again. 5 years, just rent it and then be fine without it. And then there's needing to own it where you have the opportunity to watch it at any point. Lord of the Rings is even a step above that, where it's just taken over the culture. It is in most homes just because it's so good and it's still talked about. Whereas some movies from last year, we're not going to talk about ever again. Lord of the Rings, 25 years almost, is still being talked about. That's what's great. The second thing that I was going to talk about, and this is more of a question for Will, unless Annika, you got through part of Rings of Power, but Will said that he's watched Rings of Power, and the character of Galadriel is the main character. And there have been dozens, if not hundreds of video essays talking about the character of Galadriel and how they changed her for the Rings of Power. Care to talk about that, Will?
Yeah, I'll briefly describe that. I'm just going to say, though, at the start, though, that the Rings of Power has had a pretty big backlash against it, mostly because people are like, okay, we got lightning in the bottle. They're just going to force feed it and trying to capture something that's not going to work. And that's true. That's Hollywood. They don't know when to stop. We've already discussed that. But I would say that when I watched Rings of Power, it's, you know, if you took it out of context of Lord of the Rings and it's an own TV show essentially, and like Lord of the Rings didn't exist as a franchise, it still would be a pretty meh film. But it's not like, oh my goodness, I can't watch through this. I personally was able to go, that's kind of enjoyable, I guess. So they're not like the worst of the worst of the worst, I don't think. That being said, however, in the context of being a Lord of the Rings film, Lord of the Rings TV show, yeah, they missed the mark on a lot of different things. A lot of it on the lore, which is part of the fact that like Amazon doesn't have rights to really Lord of the Rings. They have rights to, I'm remembering correctly, they have rights to the appendix of some of the books. So they're very, 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 very limited with what they were able to do. And then with that, they took the lore and changed it all up and switched it up. Like, this is going to be spoilers if people care, I guess, but like Sauron is in there and he's actually a guy, and then he's like secretly human, and then they kind of portray him as like a little sympathetic, but then he's not. It gets confusing. The main thing though is with Galadriel, because Galadriel is in the show, but she's not Galadriel as we see her in Lord of the Rings. Because as I mentioned before, Galadriel in Lord of the Rings trilogy is, you can tell that whatever she is, she's seen a lot and she is very powerful. She's not sudden or aggressive or all sorts of different things like that. She's very, I wouldn't say calculating, but like there's a deeper wisdom and power and strength that she has that you don't really want to mess with. Galadriel in Rings of Power is basically a worse version of Eowyn, I'd say, to put it simply. She's very much like almost like a crazy version of like the shoot first, ask question later type of an idea, where she's like always like, okay, there's orcs all over, I need to kill them, I'm just gonna fight my way through everything, I'm going to be aggressive to these people who saved me even though I was on this island. I'm just going to be kind of like mouth off at them even though that's probably not a smart thing to do. All that sort of things. And she never admits that she ever done anything wrong. All sorts of different stuff like that. So it's really a perversion of the character of Galadriel, because Galadriel is not like the warrior woman archetype, which is an archetype, but she's not that. And so they really take that version. And I think this is kind of spreading the idea of like femininity, masculinity, that maybe is a topic of another time. But it seems to be that within the culture, it's the idea that we want strong, independent women, and strong, independent women apparently just are basically, it seems to be men. That seems to be the goal, is to just do everything guys can do and just try it better, which is, I guess you're not really a cool, powerful woman unless you can swing a sword and kill stuff. So that's like the big thing with Galadriel's character and how it's just quite different. And it's all like about that. And in comparison to, I'd say, which I think is a much more interesting portrayal in the Lord of the Rings. So, yeah.
From what I've gathered, it sounds like they took Galadriel from the movies, who is fearsome in her own way, as Annika said, to be worthy of respect in a different way than just a warrior. And they took that character and said the only way she will be respected is if she's a warrior. And that is not Galadriel. She's respected in a different way, but there's this mentality that to be respected, you must be tough and you must be strong. And that's the whole point of Galadriel, is that she doesn't have to be a warrior in the movie. She's not a warrior. She's a wizard. I believe she's a part of the wizard community. I don't know what else to call them. And that's where her power comes from. Her power does not come from being a warrior. And that's where they got her character wrong in Rings of Power.
Yeah, she's most powerful when her strength is subdued, because you know it's there, but she's not necessarily showing her hand. And I think that's where you get in her big speech when she's rejecting the Frodo offering her the ring. Her last line is, "All shall love me in despair." I think that's such a cool line of, if she were to take the ring, she would be so incredibly powerful that it's almost like beyond comprehension. And because of her beauty and her grace and her power as a woman, then, you know, she says she will be a dark queen, beautiful but terrible. And I think that that's just so cool.
I would say that's similar to Aragorn as well, where he knew that he couldn't take the ring because of his own reasons. He knew what it would do to him. And she's the same boat. Not necessarily, again, it's not a comparison of feminine or masculine. It's just a character who's like, the hobbits are the only ones who really can carry it because they're so simple and they're worth it. And yeah, you said that she's bridled chaos, and I don't remember if it happens. I'm sure it happens in the Lord of the Rings movies, but in the Hobbit, she has the moment where she kind of banishes Sauron until the Hobbit movie, or until the Lord of the Rings movies, and she does her whole whatever it was. She has a creepy voice. She looks creepy. I don't know what that's called, but that's her power unleashed, I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to circle back to Arwen really quick because you reminded me of something, Will, in talking about the scene where she brings Frodo to the elves when he's dying from the stab wound, and that sequence was originally written to be done by another elf that was a man. I can't remember his name, but again, I think that's another really smart adaptation that Peter Jackson made, as opposed to having that huge act done by someone we kind of see once and then don't really see again. Switching that to Arwen, so we do see her strength and her ability to, you know, ride like crazy and fight off the ring wraiths. So we see that physical strength in her alongside with her later showing of more of the emotional, tender, caring side. So I just think that was another just a very good example of how to do adaptation well, and extremely well for that matter.
Did you want to talk about the third character?
Yes. So Éowyn is one of my personal favorites over the whole course of the story. She's just so cool, and I think she's one of those characters that you sort of love more and more with each watch. At least for me, she definitely wasn't one of my favorites the first couple times I watched the movies, but as I watched them more and more, she's one of those characters that you just grow to absolutely love and cherish. And I think her character is just so interesting, and if you think about it, she's probably the most fleshed out woman we do see in the movies. I don't know, someone has probably calculated everyone's screen time, but if I had to guess, she's probably the woman with the most like total minute on screen. And I think that's very cool. She is so awesome because she is strong in so many different ways. You know, she sees that her uncle is under this spell, and yet she's doing her best to hold fast by him and by her brother. And when this creepy dude is creeping on her, she resists his advances, even if it would maybe be beneficial for the kingdom overall. She stands strong and knows that what he's doing to her uncle is wrong and that there's something bigger and deeper going on here. And then as we get to see her more on her own, we see that she is a leader in her kingdom, which is incredible. And there's the one part where Theoden, before him and Éomer are going to go off to war, he basically gives the kingdom to her in the instance that him and Éomer die, which is just crazy considering, you know, it's written in a fantastical version of medieval times where having a woman as queen would basically be pretty much unthinkable. And I just think it's cool that she displays such a strong sense of compassionate, empathetic, and yet so strong leadership. And when he discourages her from going into war, she refuses because she knows she can do it. I think another aspect of it is that her victory against the Witch King is earned. I think another problem that I have with a lot of modern writing, especially when it comes to women, is, and men too, is that things are almost too easily earned. And the first example that pops into my mind is Shang-Chi, where Awkwafina's character goes into like the weapons place and grabs a bow and arrow. And as soon as she did that, I was immediately like, okay, she's gonna bring down like a huge monster super easily, even though she's never had archery training ever in her life before. And then it happened, and I was like, well, of course. But for Éowyn, she talks with Aragorn about how the women of Rohan are trained to be strong in that way, and then there are the shield maidens who are more particularly and more skilled in that particular way of defense. And so she has both of those aspects that make her so cool. Is she has the tenderness and the nurturing and the leadership. Also, she's still a fighter in a physical way, you know, as she ends up bringing down one of the biggest bads in the whole entire movie. And it's just an epic scene because it feels earned. You know, she takes the hits, she gets wounded severely, but yet she keeps fighting, and I think that's just so cool.
Clarify for me. We started talking about Éowyn, then Galadriel, now we're back to Éowyn, and we haven't talked about Arwen yet, correct?
A little bit. She touched on it.
We talked about Arwen, then Galadriel, then we went back to Arwen, now we're talking about Éowyn.
Okay.
Probably because Éowyn's just kind of cool. But I mean, also, like, Arwen doesn't have, just like in general, she probably has like less screen time and focus. Like, they did do the changes, because like in the book, Arwen, I think, wasn't as active and present, but she was still kind of important factor in Aragorn's life, at least. But I think like in the films, though, the main thing about Arwen, though, is that the fact that she's willing to basically give up immortality to be with the person that she loves, and that her fate is what is in the third film when it talks about like her fate is directly tied to the fate of the ring, which is kind of strange. And I can't remember the full context for that, but basically like she serves like as an important component within like Aragorn's own quest, like what should I do and what's the cost for things like this and for my quest that I'm going to be taking.
Okay, I was confused because Arwen and Éowyn, first off, sound very similar. I feel like that was a mistake to include two names that sound so similar. Whether that was Peter Jackson's fault or Tolkien's fault.
Take it up with Tolkien. He had siblings named Éowyn, Éomer, Faramir, Boromir.
Faramir.
Everyone's name sounds so alike.
Try reading anything about English history, and they're all called Henry or John.
That's fair.
We'll just step up from that.
Yeah. So sorry for my confusion. I legitimately thought we were talking about Éowyn in the first half. But my bad. We move on. If we're done with talking about the ladies, what are some other book versus movie adaptations that they didn't get right? Because obviously a majority of it is correct. That's how most adaptations should be. But even we were doing the live stream recently, and Roman, Deacon's little brother, was talking about how Harry Potter gets bumped down a few tiers because of the comparison, the books to the movies. Like, movies on their own are pretty decent, but if you compare them to the books, they're dropped down because you're like, oh, they kind of dropped the ball on that. So is there anything in the Lord of the Rings that severely stands out, other than we've kind of talked about the ladies being explored a little bit more in their character? They obviously wrote in a bunch of stuff for The Hobbit, but as for the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, what stuff in there was added or taken away?
Yeah, I think the pacing at the beginning of the story is one of those things that in the books, Gandalf leaves Frodo to go research about the ring, and a lot of time passes. I'm spitballing here and saying it's like 15 years, I think. It's a pretty significant chunk of time. Whereas in the movies, it kind of feels like it's maybe 3 months, and then he comes back and they go off on this adventure. I think each adaptation works well for its own form. In a movie, especially when you're world building, you're introducing characters, you're getting the story going, your pacing has to be quick and tight. And I think having a time jump in there for a movie would have really made the story lag, and it would have made people not as engaged. Whereas with the book, it's okay because it kind of builds the suspense and builds the mystery of like, okay, what's happening here, and that kind of a thing. The other thing that I find interesting is that in the books, Bilbo very much plans that he's going to leave with the ring. He still doesn't know he's going to take it all the way to Mordor. He thinks he's just going to take it to the elves, but it's a much more calculated departure. Whereas in the movies, it's kind of this slapdash. He's grabbing his stuff, he's throwing it in his backpack, and he's running out, which again, I think each version works for the form that it was in. The more planned out, thoughtful version works for the books, but for the movies, they really needed that sense of urgency and that sort of just rapidity for things to happen much more fast to get people engaged, get people hooked, and so that, the story would actually get going. I would have loved to have seen Tom Bombadil in maybe an extended version. I think that would be really cool because he is a very interesting character, and Goldberry, his wife, also they're just so bizarre, but also like the way Tolkien describes them is just so beautiful and fascinating that I'm like, I just want to see them. I want to see what they look like. I want to see what their house looks like. I want the hobbits to spend the night there and eat all the food. And but ultimately I realized they had to cut that out because it would have felt very out of place. But that part in the book is one of my favorites just because I think it's so fascinating. And maybe it's one of those things that I have more fun with that part of the book because I get to imagine it a little bit more as opposed to sort of letting the depictions of the movie sort of inform the way I think. So yeah, that's one thing that I maybe selfishly would have liked, was to have Goldberry and Tom Bombadil, but ultimately I understand why they decided to make that change.
So not a lot of differences.
The only other major one that I know of is the Scouring of the Shire.
Oh, that one too. Whoa.
Angel Will over here.
I have become enlightened.
Continue.
That's a good point. Well, I forgot about that one, but yeah.
The Scouring of the Shire, which is basically in the books, they destroy the ring, they defeat the bad guys, and all things seems pretty honky-dory. But then the hobbits come back to the Shire, and they find out that Saruman is there, and he's basically taken it over, and they essentially lead like a mini revolution and take him out. That didn't happen in the film. In the film, Saruman gets killed by Wormtongue, and which did happen in the books, but like not at that point. And then when they come back, like it does end better. And basically, Peter Jackson explained for the purposes of the film, you wouldn't want like another 15 or 20 minute or half an hour. It's basically just, oh yay, we defeated it, Mr. Frodo. Yeah, good job. And then I guess we got to stop this. So it's in the purposes of the book. There's a certain thematic importance of the Scouring of the Shire, but I think they made a good choice in not including it in the film.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons for me that immediately come to mind why that was a good choice. One, The Return of the King already gets some heat for having too many endings, which is not an opinion I personally hold, but it does make sense. You know, it kind of feels like, you know, things have wrapped up and then there's a very long concluding action. But I also think it would have felt very discouraging for viewers to have to see these characters who have already gone through so much have to fight for their home again. Like, having gone all the way through all the Mount Doom stuff, the throwing the ring in the fire, everything that happened with that, having to return home and not have home be home, I think would have honestly been really kind of devastating for viewers who have just gone through this whole journey with these characters and thought it was resolved, and then all of a sudden it's not. So again, I think for the purposes of a movie where you want to get stuff wrapped up real quick so that viewers can have a really fast, satisfying ending, it was a smart choice to have them be able to just return home to the beautiful, pristine Shire that they left and have a peaceful return. And then again, I don't think it's in the theatrical version, but it's in the extended version. There's a scene where they go to the bar where one of the last scenes before Frodo leaves occurs, and the four hobbits sit down and they're sharing a beer and they're looking around, and everything around them is almost the same as they left it. And they're looking at each other and they have this really beautiful moment where they're looking at each other and they're like, no one else will understand this journey that we went through. Even if we tell them, even if it goes down in the storybooks, they know that no one else will fully understand. And I think that little moment sort of serves the purpose that maybe the Scouring of the Shire does have in the books, of helping these guys to understand that they've gone through something that's totally unique, totally different than anything any hobbits have ever done before. And they're returning to the Shire, which is the same place, because the Shire hasn't changed, but they've changed so much. And now they have to figure out how to fit into this world again.
They're trying to figure out how the end of their character arc fits with their unchanged home, and that just seems out of place for them. And I think that's a great character arc by itself. It's like, you've grown up so much, but yet you come back to what you're familiar with, and it's not the same. It's not familiar anymore. Yeah. That's great. We didn't really talk about Legolas and Gimli. Their friendship is one of a kind as its own thing. I think it's so fun to watch them banter, and Gimli's the comedy relief. Legolas, in another sense, more in a dry way. But they're very fun to watch. They're very goofy. They compete constantly, and yet they're loyal. I think that's most of what Lord of the Rings is all about. Sam being loyal to Frodo, Aragorn being loyal to the Fellowship, all those things. Legolas and Gimli here. Fun facts, stories, analysis, go.
Overcoming racism.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Short.
It's more heightism. Which you would know about, Will. Sorry. Sorry, that was mean. My bad.
Watch out, Seth. You might be legless tomorrow.
Legless Legolas.
They are definitely the most fun, most exciting characters, especially in the movies. Again, my belief is you should watch the theatrical editions your first time, and then you watch the extended editions. That's my stance, because you get so much more of everyone in the extended editions. But especially Legolas and Gimli, I feel like you miss so much of the development of their friendship, because a lot of it was technically not necessary for the story to move along. So there's some great scenes where they're bantering. There's a great scene where they have a drinking competition, and that one's absolutely hilarious, one of my favorites. And yeah, it's one of those things that historically dwarves and elves do not get along, and you can even see that in The Hobbit and in history past. And yet these two unlikely friends are able to form one of the deepest friendships and one of the longest lasting. And if you look into some of the lore surrounding what happens after Lord of the Rings, they do end up sailing into the West together, you know, basically going into the afterlife as friends. And yeah, they're just so great.
I never knew the difference in runtime between theatrical and extended. The regular unextended Return of the King is still 3 hours and 20 minutes. That's crazy. I did not know that. Usually that is the extended edition of something or the long version of something. And then the extended version is 50 minutes longer at 4 hours and 11 minutes. I knew they were long, but I didn't realize that the regular version that they felt they had cut enough from was 3 hours and 20 minutes. They're like, nothing else can be cut. It's complete. And I was, dang. Anyways, that's a fun fact of the day. Anyways, yeah, I love Legolas and Gimli. They're very fun. I think it's interesting. We'll talk about how they were incorporated into The Hobbit when we talk about The Hobbit, with Gimli's father and then with Legolas being a superhuman who can fly. They're not superheroes, but they're super people. They're super elf. They're a super elf and super dwarf in their own right, and they're goofy, which make them fun.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because like they're very much the powerhouses of the Fellowship, because they're both warriors and they're both very skilled and capable. Like we see that like when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli all like with the army of the dead start fighting the dwarves, not the dwarves, start fighting the orcs at Minas Tirith, like you can really see that like, wow, this is like the powerhouse of the team that like brings all the weaponry and stuff like that. But I think that their friendship also speaks to the power of like loyalty and unity and how that is more effective, because when they're, even though like they're bantering and they're like saying, oh, that still only counts as one, and that whole shebang, they're still working together, and you ultimately see that culminate in the final like battle, so to speak, of the trilogy, where you know Gimli's like, you know, I can't believe I die fighting side by side with an elf, and then Legolas goes, well, you know, how about side by side with a friend? And it's like, I could do that. It's tears. bro. Yeah, but
Lord of the Rings modernized, bro, bring it in, bro.
I got you, bro.
I got your back, bro.
Yeah, but it's a really nice, touching part about within Tolkien's mythology, because like there is like a lot of deep history and stuff like that's going on, but it's not like a super complex, nuanced necessarily topic, I'd say, but like it's a very nice, refreshing way to see these two people overcoming like some of their differences and like getting a respect for each other and working together and becoming really close friends by the end of their journey. And I think that's honestly their friendship is probably the best allegory for the strength of going on the quest in and of itself, because this is a fellowship that's forged through fire. And in my experience working with like other people is that shared suffering is often the best building block for creating a relationship and a team and a friendship and a cohesive core of people. And to kind of tie this into the Christian faith, because you know we are a Christian podcast, is the fact like that's the idea, like taking up your cross, but you're not taking up your cross alone, you're doing it with others. And that's the church and the fellowship and the community that you do, is that we're suffering, but we suffer as one family, and through that we endure, and through that we are more effective in the struggles of life, and we through the struggles of our lives we build bonds with each other that are more powerful, because we share a common faith and a common discrimination as well.
Yeah, I would say that the fellowship is so tight because they have the one goal, and I would feel that that's sort of a reflection of the church and wanting to spread the gospel and live life for Christ. And that's where our unity should come from. And yet there's so many divisions that we get caught up on in the church, the greater church, and we really shouldn't. We're mostly on the same team. There is definitely room for debate about the little things, and for the big things, that's when we need to have more serious discussions. But honestly, getting caught up on the little things isn't worth it. Be graceful and be open to having your mind changed, I suppose. That's a big part. Anyways, now that we have the application out of the way, I got flack from Isaac on a recent episode because I didn't bring up the fact that I have a degree in animation. So it's time for your local news about animation and CGI and how Lord of the Rings was made with those types of things. I don't know, guys. I'm just... One of the big things that I think
Seth has a degree in animation. He's going to talk about animation of the film. There you go.
we are going to enter the part of the show where animation is talked about. I'm trying to be cheesy, and it's not even working trying to be cheesy. One of the biggest things that I can appreciate about Lord of the Rings CGI advancement is I believe it's Horde is the name of the program that they made. It was how they made the army of orcs, and I think a couple of the other armies, but mostly the orcs. They made a system to basically have multiple different versions of orc models that are paired to random skeletons, armatures that have running animations on them. And so you have millions of orcs at that location, which I can't even tell you off the top of my head what that name is, that battle. Helm's Deep, right? Is it Helm's Deep? It's in the dark.
Yeah.
It's Helm's Deep.
Yeah, Marine, yeah.
Okay. Horde, as a program that they wrote, will give a certain character model animation to run forward. It'll move them forward. It'll move their arms. It was motion captured. And then they programmed it so that when they were hit, whether it was a random arrow or a massive rock from a catapult, they would run and then they would ragdoll. And so like you could have a massive rock hit a whole crowd of orcs, and then they would all suddenly start flopping when they were collided, when collision physics hit them. And that was brand new. This was early 2000s when computers were still getting the process of computing visually through 3D really started to take off. And I'm glad that they were at that point in visual effects, because you see the difference between Hobbit and Lord of the Rings in how they treated the creatures. The Hobbit, Azog, and most of the orcs were CGI. There was almost no practical orcs in The Hobbit, and you look at the difference where even though they're both orcs, they're both gross. The Hobbit orcs were a lot more shiny and clean, even if they weren't meant to look like that. Whereas the practical ones from Lord of the Rings just look gross because the costume designer can take her jar of slime and smear it over the face of an orc to try and make him look more gross. Even the orc birthing scene where they're like in their pods and they're like that looks so gross because it was practical. You can't do that as well with animation. And so I really appreciate that, the practical use and the lack of reliance on animation and visual effects for the Lord of the Rings, but also the advancements that they made with that, as well as a lot of actual animation. I believe the Ents were motion captured and animation, because I don't think they were stop motion.
From my understanding, Weta Workshop was responsible for basically all of the production design. They did the costumes, the prosthetics, makeup, hair, the miniatures or the bigatures. From my understanding, they made basically what would have been a full-size physical model of Treebeard, so that they could get the shots of Merry and Pippin like being held in his arms while he's walking, and then they digitally replaced his face so that they could get the more active movement and sort of bring the life into his eyes, because before they were just kind of like painted golf balls. And I know, Seth, you could probably talk about the importance of having life in the eyes of a digital character. Yeah, I think it's just one of those things where, yeah, the visual effects just hold up so well, and I think it's because they just hit that sweet spot between balancing the practical and the digital effects, and using the bigatures and the matte paintings in combination with these gorgeous actual sets, and then expanded by this incredible advancements that they were having in computer generated images at the time. It's just, there's something about it that I think there are definitely a couple of things that I think haven't aged as well, but that's really only if you're looking really, really close. And there are so many other effects that I think are going to hold up for forever, just because they were so well executed that as much as anything can be timeless, they're pretty timeless.
Yeah. Weta has done some amazing things for the animation industry. They used to really work in miniatures and bigatures. They would do models. They kind of did costumes, but all of it was so that their animation artists could reference it and work well with that. And they really make sure the bridge is built between production and post-production. And you're right, the blend between both physical and animation is the best way to use animation. The Hobbit, many of modern movies, the modern Star Wars, I would say, have really leaned into just visual effects, just animation, just a green screen. All you need is a big warehouse where you can line everything up with green screen, and then make it digitally later. That's also for flexibility's sake. You can say that you, like, for example, the Avengers Endgame suits, when they were time traveling, they didn't have those suits on when they filmed it. They had their, like, Cap had his blue suit, Natasha had her black suit, their regular ones. And then in post-production, they decided, oh, well, now we're going to have completely different suits. So now we have to give them different clothes digitally, which they did fine. It looked great, but they didn't plan for that. And so now, yes, we're able to do it now, but should we? Like, literally, that's the quote. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's a lot of the downfalls of a lot of modern media. But the in-between that Weta did really well in the early 2000s. And even with Avatar obviously was all CG pretty much, except for when there's humans there. But they figure out a way to make it, to blend it. And when you switch back and forth, like, think about the Ent scene when Merry and Pippin are sitting, like, there's a close-up of just them. I'm sure that they had an actual tree that they sat on and was rocking them so that it would look like he's still moving. But when it's cropped in, you don't need a fully digital Ent or a fully claymation Ent. When you go out, then you don't need a real Merry and Pippin. You could have a CG double or something like that, or compositing or something. It's all a handshake almost that needs to be done to the best of its ability instead of just relying on one or the other.
Yeah, I think in that sense I have a question for you, because one of the things that they did so much of was the miniatures that were huge, hence the bigatures, the name bigatures. Is there a reason why studios don't utilize bigatures anymore? Because to me, in my limited knowledge, I feel like it makes for a very realistic, grounded sort of look, but I'm sure there's a reason people have moved away from that, because it's no longer industry standard when it used to be.
They're so expensive.
More expensive than, like, making a CG Helm's Deep. Like, that's what I don't understand. Like, how can a big piece of foam and clay be more expensive than spending hours upon hours upon hours upon hours trying to get, like, a perfectly realistically rendered city of some sort? I don't know. Maybe it's just something that I don't understand because I don't have a degree in animation, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so first to define our terms. I'm in my sweet spot, so I might be babbling for a little bit. To define our terms, for those of you who don't know, bigatures are small sets. They're called, because usually you would call them a miniature, a smaller version of the set that's probably like maybe the size of a table. But if you need more detail, you're going to make a big miniature. So it's still smaller than an actual set, but it needs to be massive for scale. What's Sauron's, like, layer that's underground with all the orcs?
Isengard.
Sure. There's a cool shot where it's, like, flying through all of that. Those are multiple different bigatures that they're actually flying a camera through, and it's more or less stop motion. Quarter Digital has, like, 2 or 3 great videos on how they did this, but these bigatures are so big, and when it comes to the cost differences, hopefully the producer and other people have run the numbers. For Tenet, for example, Christopher Nolan said it's going to be way cheaper to run an actual plane through a building than to do it digitally. It's not quite as simple as just labor. I mean, labor for both of them is the main thing. Labor is included in building miniatures and bigatures, but then you also have the resources, and I'm sure that takes a lot of time. Where the cost for animation goes, obviously, you have labor. You can pay the fee for the editing and modeling program, and that's can be a subscription. It's crazy for actual studios, but on top of labor, you are also paying for all of the computing power to get those frames rendered. And I would say that it's easy to make a very good and very realistic computer animation. Like, let's say recreating Helm's Deep completely from scratch, completely in the computer. They could do that. It's not, you still have to form it in a way that you think would look right. And that's the tough part. When you make something physically and you film it at night when there's a moon, or even you know what the moon looks like, and then you use an actual light to make it look like the moon, that's going to be way more realistic with atmosphere, and you can pump fog in. You can control that a little bit. You can control the same things in, I use Blender, but most studios use Maya. You can control those things in Maya and various other programs, but it's numbers instead of physical things you can control. And there's a debate about, like, with the volume that they use for Mandalorian, they can model the atmosphere and the world on a whim while they're on set. And that's a great thing in and of itself, but it can't be overused because then you feel enclosed like the Mandalorian really felt. When it comes to bigatures, you can put all that detail in because you're paying those people to sit there and like paint the little ladder that the orc is going to climb up, and they can do that. That's how they choose to spend their money. So both of them are very expensive. The animation comes a lot from the computational power. For many of those old movies, it took days to render a single frame, depending on what it was. And so just paying for that amount of time for using that computer, using that amount of graphics processing in whether it was their computer or a server farm, which I don't think they really had server farms back then. It's very expensive. Quarter does a great job with it. I would prefer a bigature over a completely computer generated image because there's more realism just with, like I said, atmosphere, lighting, texture, all of that stuff. There, I'm done spieling.
Thanks.
That was over explaining. I'm sorry.
Cool. It's okay.
Learn the more you know.
The last thing I wanted to ask, and it was we kind of touched on this in the soundtracks episode, which is still one of my favorite episodes so far. Music. I mean, that's pretty obvious when we talked about it in the soundtracks episode, but what are some of your favorite not soundtracks, the whole thing is a soundtrack. What's your favorite track from the Lord of the Rings that you could listen to over and over? Because I know it's just one of those that's vibey, as our generation likes to say. We like to set the atmosphere. Annika probably has her Hobbit playlist that she listens to in the costume shop.
Well, I have multiple. Don't you worry. For different movies.
Don't underestimate.
Just wait for her Annoyed with Her Older Brother playlist.
Oh.
Got him, I guess. I am deeply, deeply in love with the Concerning Hobbits theme. Some people just call it the Shire theme. I think that's definitely a apt name. In my silly little mind, I think it would be cute to walk down the aisle to that song because for me, it just means peace and home and love and just everything that's beautiful. And I think it's so well utilized throughout the movies because almost any time characters are talking about memories or things getting better or anything kind of starts to turn around and get good again, that theme comes back in different forms and in different arrangements, and it's just so beautiful. One of my favorite moments that it comes back is when Sam and Frodo are making their way up the mountain and they're talking about the Shire, and it's right before the moment where Sam picks up Sam and has his iconic, I can't carry the ring, but I can carry you, and that theme comes back very strong and triumphant, and it's just gorgeous because it symbolizes everything that they're fighting for. And so having it come back in that moment and then come back again after they've finished the task and are talking about, going home, and Sam is like, if I could marry one girl, it'd be Rosie Cotton. They're thinking about going home again. It just is so well utilized throughout the story to kind of, I think, remind the viewer of the end goal here, which is to make the world safe again for the normal person, the average person who may not even hear about all that's happening in these faraway lands, but they'll still be safe and they'll still have a home because of the heroic deeds that all these incredible characters are accomplishing.
Before Will goes, I wanted to, you kind of brought up a point about superheroes. Maybe you didn't realize it, but the difference in a humble superhero versus a proud superhero. Iron Man versus Frodo and Sam. You mentioned the scene that they are back in the Shire and they're just sitting there and they're realizing none of these people know what we experience. And they're not going to shout it from their mountaintops. They're not going to say, look at us, we're so amazing. They went back and lived a humble life. Whereas Iron Man, at the end of Iron Man 1, he's like, I am Iron Man, give me all the glory. And that's kind of the story of the MCU of being prideful about that. And it comes with its own things, but I think it's more valuable to be a superhero like Sam and Frodo, like Merry and Pippin, who really don't get praise they do get praise. They get plenty of praise. You bow to no one is one of the greatest lines in those movies. It makes you shed a tear. But the respect that they get is in a different form, and they are not really prideful about it. They did it because they loved the Shire and they loved the people there, and they wanted it to be the best they can. Now, Will, you can tell Annika how she stole yours just because she went first.
Yeah, you did steal mine, because if you listen to our music episode, you know that's that scene where they're on the mountain. He's like, I can't carry it but I can carry you. That's one of my favorite scenes of all time. That's also one of my favorite musical scores of all time. So thanks. Not that I'm bitter, but that is legitimately though one of my favorite. And I actually do have the Lord of the Rings soundtrack as a CD that I can play in my car because I love it so much. But like Howard Shore just does a great job. I think the other musical score that I love is the Ride of the Rohirrim, and that's also another one of my favorite scenes of all time in cinema, because you get to see like Theoden and like, okay, we talked about like masculinity and femininity a little bit. I'm just gonna say like the charge scene is like the most like woohoo guy thing I can think of. Like seriously, it's like the meme of like what is it? Like the girl's like, I bet he's like outside cheating or something like that. Or no. I wonder what like he's thinking in his head. It's just like I just think about that scene. Okay, that's what's stuck in my head. Okay, and because it's so much fun because it's really like Theoden's like, yes, death, and like everybody else is shouting death, and like they all charge, and like the musical score like crescendos, and they plow into and then like you see the orcs, they shoot the arrows, and then like some of them fall, and some like one of the guys, speaking of things that's real life, like all of those were like real horse actors, and I as someone who has a little bit of horse riding skills, I respect them, especially the one guy who actually fell, because if you look closely at like one of the scenes, one of the guys actually did fall down while they were charging, but he survived, which is incredible. Again, I've watched all the bonus features. I'm a little crazy like that. But then like then like they plow into the orcs. The orcs like, oh, we're screwed because this is a whole bunch of horses and they're not stopping. And then that's like, that is cinema.
If you don't follow our Instagram, definitely go look at it right now, because I guarantee you I have made the reel, or I have made the meme of that Will just described of, I bet he's thinking about other girls and he's just thinking of the Ride of the Rohirrim. That's all that goes through Will's mind.
Everything on the movie was so excellently done, and yeah, Howard Shore's score and the way he has different motifs he has the Rohan theme, he has the Gondor theme, he has the Isengard theme, he has the Arwen and Aragorn theme. Everybody has a theme, and it just works so well, and then it's used so incredibly intelligently to help the audience to think certain thoughts, feel certain emotions, whether they're like consciously thinking it or not. I think is just great. Yeah, my second favorite is probably the Fellowship theme, just because it's so big and epic, and the way it builds up. I'm much smarter people have done videos on how music theory plays into what makes that score so great. And yeah, go do your own research, because it is crazy the amount of meaning and work that went into the music alone.
Yeah, I think what you said is very similar to what I would say. I can't say exactly which one is my favorite because I don't listen to it all that much, but the Shire theme is so iconic, and it's one of those motifs that can be brought back over and over again whenever there is a theme where they're like, oh, back in the Shire or something like that. It's just so beautiful. It's well written. It transports you there immediately. Like, I'm sure just listening to that song makes you want to go to New Zealand. It's she's like, yes, yeah, of course. Yeah, something about capturing the feeling of a visual in music is something that certain composers can really do, and I think Lord of the Rings does that well with different techniques and all of that. It's so good. Because we probably will not talk about Lord of the Rings again, do you have any last thoughts that you want to get off your back?
I think we should finish out with a certain scene.
I didn't think it would end this way.
End? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path. One that we all must take. The grey rain curtain of this world rolls back, and all turns to silver glass. And then you see it.
What? Gandalf. See what?
White shores. And beyond. A far green country, and to a swift sunrise.
That isn't so bad.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, I just love that quote because I think it's one of the more allegorical things that Tolkien wrote into the books was the idea of there being this sort of heaven in the land of the Lord of the Rings, and it's a beautiful place that those who have their hope and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ will get to see one day after all the journeys and struggles and hardships of this world are over.
We talked a little bit about the ending, I think, last episode, but I do think that Lord of the Rings does have a really, really nicely done ending that's still unique compared to other like traditional fantasy novels and stories and movies and whatever that have even come afterwards. Because, you know, we talked about how like Gollum is the one who Gollum is the reason that the ring is destroyed, which is kind of a commentary on like evil and Tolkien's view of it and stuff. But also the fact that like the journey and the quest that the Fellowship goes on, it does leave a mark. And especially for like Frodo, like he talks about how he still feels the weight. And I think that speaks to Tolkien's experience of like having gone through World War I and the horrors of that, and like having that probably leave some impact on himself as well as it did a lot of soldiers. And how like Lord of the Rings, like it ends well, but there's a bit sort of like melancholy and a bit of bittersweetness to it because the elves are leaving, like the sort of mythical, magical elements of the world are starting to go away, and they talk about it as the age of men, the age of like industry of sorts, of logic and understanding of things where like grand magical forests and eldritch creatures and powerful rings and sorcerers, that's starting to fade away, and the world's becoming a little less wondrous, you could say, because those things are passing on and moving away. And there's a bit of like melancholy to that. There's a bit of like sadness to that as well, that like these great things are kind of moving away as men start to take dominion, and as like elves and dwarves disappear and all sorts of things like that. And like Frodo himself, he leaves. But I also do love how it ends though, with the idea that it starts kind of like the Lord of the Rings trilogy starts with like Galadriel and like this epic story and this the Nine Rings and the Nazgul and this opening prologue of like cool epic proportions. But it ends with like Sam with his family, simply and contently, and he's just like, well, I'm back. Despite everything that's happened, I'm here. I've got my family with me. I'm home. And he shuts the door, and that's the end. And it's so low key, you could say, that it's beautiful in a very real and wonderful sense. And it just always is very striking and stirring to me that that's how it ends. And just speaking about music quickly, I love the ending song, which is Into the West by Annie Lennox. I think that's the one who sings it.
I don't think it's by her, but she sings it.
Where I love like the song Into the West, and that's one of my favorite parts of the soundtrack, and how that's again talking about the journey and the mystery, the final mystery, which is what happens once you die, and where does Frodo end up, and what does he see? And yeah, I just love that about that and how it ends.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes is kind of become a sound bite for social media. It's Gandalf saying, "The world is not in your books and maps; it's out there. Go touch some grass," is what Gandalf is saying. But honestly, books and movies are great, but God's world is so much better, and God's story is the best story of all. And Lord of the Rings can only reflect that and do so much to show us back to the greatest story ever told, and that's Jesus and God. And I'm very tired and want to be done. I'm sorry, guys. This has been a great episode. Thank you for talking and nerding out about different things about this. I really appreciate it. Follow Annika at Annika Makes Stuff, because even though she self-declared that she doesn't post things on it, she actually does really good stuff. She's in the costume shop right now. That's her go-to way to make art of her own. So I will link that in the description. Follow Will nowhere because he doesn't have social media. Follow us at When I Film Podcast on all social media platforms.
You can't find me, you fools.
Find us on all social media platforms. Except for TikTok, because I killed that for no reason except I didn't want to post there anymore. So, and then join our Discord where you can discuss these things there, and also make a tier list, because we did a tier list live stream recently, and I would love to know what your tier list would look like that wasn't controlled by me, because I kind of was the be all end all for that live stream, and I'm not proud of it. But anyways, until next week, know that you're loved. God bless.
Blanket lady out.
Bye-bye.
She didn't need to leave.